$175 million, it sounds like a big number. People say, well, there's $175 million collected. How would you replace that? But let's unpackage that. That's in the context of a $28.2 some odd billion state budget this year. Billion. $175 million, I did just a little napkin scratching last night and thinking about this question. $175 million is 0.625% of that total budget. So it's less than 0.7% of that entire budget. To put it in real terms for people, if you take a family that makes $50,000 a year, the same percentage of their annual income would be $312. Now, as parents, if we were to find that $312 of our income was due to some wrong, such as, I don't know, we find out our kid is stealing other kids' lunch money to the tune of $312 a year, would the answer to that be, that's wrong, but until we figure out how to replace that 0.625% of our family revenue, you keep on doing that. We'll do a comprehensive review of our finances, and after that, we'll decide how you can stop stealing lunch money. Of course not, and it's a silly example, but everyone says saddling East-West commuters with the entire debt burden of the Big Dig is wrong. But that's where they stop. They say it's wrong, but then they say, oh, we need to do another review. Or, oh, we're gonna enact a comprehensive reform next year and take care of that. In the meantime, our tolls keep getting hiked, as they must, because in order to pay these debt obligations, the Turnpike Authority Board is obligated to continue to increase our tolls. They will continue to increase. We're about to get them doubled. They will increase beyond that until we merge the Turnpike Authority into Mass Highway, eliminate it as a freestanding entity, absorb that debt payment, which is less than 0.625 of the entire state budget, and do away with the tolls, to do away with the ability of our legislature, which is dominated by people who don't live out here, to continue to saddle us with that burden and continue to kick the can down the road. I think our voters need someone who holds their interests paramount. Their interests, our interests.
So here's your magic wand. I mean, I thought you said absorb this 0.625. I don't know what that means. Here's your magic wand. Make that whole Metro West toll pike tolls go away and address the increased congestion downtown Boston. How do you do that? What does that look like?
Well, the increased congestion issue, I think that's a red herring to say that we ought to maintain an inequitable system for fear of increased congestion. Massachusetts has plenty of congestion and we ought to be dealing with that. But to say, so sorry, out in Metro West, you ought to continue to pay this unfair burden, pay your share of the gas tax plus pay tolls in ever-increasing amounts. I just don't think that's what people want from their representative, that kind of position, saying, well, long-term, it's not in our interest to take down tolls. It's not she said earlier, it wouldn't be in our environmental long-term interest to take down tolls. I think it's in our region's interest to take down tolls and quit saddling us with this unfair burden that everybody says is unfair. You won't find a single person who will say, that's fair, that makes sense, that ought to be maintained. But when the rubber meets the road, sorry.
Right, so draw the picture, draw the perfect picture, how everything gets addressed, absolved, and it's more equitable.
Well, David, I think this is the problem with this point of view, you're accepting the point of view that says that in order to take down the tolls, we need to solve all the other problems. This is a big problem, and it's a wrong that everyone agrees needs to be redressed. So to continue to say, we can only redress this problem in the context of solving all the other problems is to continue to kick the can down the road while our tolls continue to go up. I'm saying we need more people in the legislature to say, step one is to say what you did in 1997 was wrong and undo that. Step two is to say that when Metro West commuters were promised decades ago that the tolls were only to remain so long as it took to pay off the cost of building the pike, which happened decades ago, that ought to be undone. To continue to kick the can down the road and just leave well enough alone, the kinds of changes that Carolyn was talking about, those are decade-long projects, if we had the funding to do them and if we could start them today. In the meantime, our tolls are going to continue to go up, and I don't think Metro West commuters want to accept that. And I'll fight against that.
Response?
I do. Just to respond to several of the comments that were made. First, the implication that to do as I proposed would involve leaving an inequitable situation in place. I think I've been pretty clear that I think it is inequitable. I think it's unsatisfactory the way it is now, and I think the proposal that I have put forth addresses both the inequity and the congestion issue. Second, back to the original question about the cost benefit of merging the Mass Highway and the Turnpike Authority. The only cost savings that I have heard out of Dan seem to be related to tolls, which is a savings that we could get through improved technology without any merger of Mass Highway and the Turnpike Authority at all. And then my third point would be, to your point, David, which is Dan talking about absorbing the cost of removing the tolls, and that cost goes somewhere. And I've said all along that until you can be clear about where that cost is going to go, and I know a number of legislators currently in the State House have proposed a small gas tax increase in order to do just that, absorb this debt payment and make the payments while taking down the tolls. I think Dan needs to be honest with how exactly are we going to absorb that debt and what is the mechanism for that going to be.
That's good, because I spun out on the larger issues and didn't get to the report that I referenced, KPMG's audit of the Turnpike Authority, which contains just mind-blowing inefficiencies. So I'm happy to list some of those, and they really surprise and shock some people. First off, the Turnpike Authority pays its employees, its maintenance employees, so plow drivers and grass cutters and sign hangers and all these, beyond toll takers, an average of 36% higher salaries than people doing comparable or identical jobs elsewhere in the state's highway system. Right there, you've got, stemming from the fact that it was a closed system for so long, you've had salary inflation beyond what people get through the rest of the system. You get 36% savings in salaries right there. The average toll taker on the Pike puts in a claim for $3,200 some odd dollars in workers' comp every single year. That's a couple $1,000,000 right there. Apparently, toll taking is one of the most dangerous jobs in our state government. Petty theft in our toll system is rampant. KPMG did just random spot checks and was finding averages of $750 a shift in mismatch between the receipts and the traffic that flowed through the booth. We've got, here's another perfect example. When it snows, we know, living in this state, sometimes it'll snow like heck in Worcester and rain like heck in Boston. Because of union contracts that the Turnpike is saddled with, the Turnpike is unable to say, it's snowing like heck in Worcester, and we've got a whole bunch of plows in Boston standing by. They can't send those plows to Worcester to plow because of the contracts. They have to call in plow drivers from Worcester and pay them double time to plow, instead of while they pay these guys to sit in their trucks and idle in the pouring rain. There are all kinds of inefficiencies like that. It's just that the system is, to say, point me to inefficiencies in the Mass Turnpike system. To me, that's like, the reason I have a hard time answering the question is the reality that I know. It's like standing on the beach and saying, no, tell me specifically what's wet. Point out to something that's wet. It's inefficient. It's corrupt. It wastes money. And it ought to be eliminated. And the governor has proposed eliminating it. And I assume my opponent trusts that the governor has a way to deal with quote unquote lost revenues from that. He's proposed fundamental pension reform, which I'm glad to see. But this notion that, we can't do that because there's no way, and again, I'll make the point, 0.625% of the state budget. If our state budget is operating in a way that it cannot find a way to compensate for 0.625%, without going back to the taxpayers' wallets in a different way, we've got some very serious problems here. And Carolyn's solution, she immediately goes to, maybe we ought to make it up with a gas tax increase. That's just saying, here, taxpayer, here's some money here, but